Okay, I think we're live.
Hello,
Hello,
everyone.
Linus.
Hello, Andreas.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
I am great, a little bit lost, but
Why is
what I
that?
normally do at the start of the stream is just to wait for people to acknowledge that we are visible.
Right.
So let's see if they do that. But we are getting some messages here that look like they might be seeing us. So we are obviously streaming in a new way today. Hey, okay. Somebody says they can see us
Great.
both. Yeah, so we're using some new streaming software to be able to do this together. So everything is new, weird. Anyway, this week we are joined by Linus, who is very, very active SerenityOS developer, I would say, for a long time. And you probably already know him from YouTube, Twitter, and from SerenityOS itself, of course. And I thought we would just do sort of the usual SerenityOS office hours format where we take questions, except Linus will help me answer them. And he is free to go on whatever tangent he wants.
Sounds good.
Cool. And by the way, before I forget, let me just say thank you to Sharik for the super sticker chat. Really appreciate that. And also to Evolve a Project for joining the Golden Yak herd. And hello, everybody, by the way.
I know Sharik, actually, so hi.
Oh, sweet. And, oh, there's so many people, but the comments look all different in this interface. I'm going to have to get used to that. Anyway, yeah, so the chat is not up on screen. Yes, we are aware, and that is not a feature of this streaming platform that we're using at the moment. But I believe I can do this to highlight your message.
That works well, yeah.
Yeah, so if we start responding to a message, we'll just bring it up on the screen, and or at least I will try to remember to do that. Okay, so I guess while we wait for questions to come in, maybe you can tell us a bit about what you've been working on recently, Linus?
Recently, I mean, the whole last month basically has been dominated by the new Yakut programming language. So everyone, including myself, has kind of been a bit less active than usual, and also been focusing on Yakut itself. So I did a few contributions just before it got published, and then a little bit of work after it was published. But that kind of slowed down, so I kind of went back to just Serenity work. Been doing a lot of temporal stuff recently, as I do. They just keep updating the spec over and over again, fixing issues, making it more streamlined, and like kind of preparing it for stage 4, basically, which means inclusion in the regular JavaScript specification, not being a proposal anymore. So it's definitely moving into that direction. Very excited about that, by the way. It's going to be great when all the major browsers just ship all that massive API.
Yeah, it's funny. Like if you look at our implementation, it feels like it's more than half of the JavaScript engine is just the temporal API.
Yeah, I had a look actually a while ago. I think it's around 40% or so. It's massive. It's absolutely massive.
Crazy. Yeah. Oh, we have some questions here. Let's let's start with something for you.
What's your educational background, Linus? Fachinformatiker? No. So the highest education I have is high school, I guess. So I went to a German gymnasium. And after I finished that, I was planning to go to university, as most people do, after that. And I kind of just started working because I didn't want to go to university immediately after school. So I started working, and then I kind of ended up in London, where I still work as a software engineer. And so I never went to uni. So that's sort of where I'm at now.
Yeah, I can relate to that. It's you kind of feel like, oh, you can just go to uni later if you have to.
Exactly. That was basically my thinking, and it just never happened.
And oh, we got more questions for you. I'm just gonna line these up.
What does a typical day look for you? How do you split work between day job and Serenity stuff? So I'm flexibly working between sometimes in the office, sometimes from home. So sometimes my day starts by going on a London commute, which can suck a bit, making my way into the office. But sometimes work from home or just remotely, pretty flexible. And then I just do basically a regular work day. I sometimes do like pull requests in between, because I find it very, very good for myself to like just stack pull request reviews and like do some of them for work, some of them for open source. Like it works very well to do them like in a row, because I can't do that context switching very well, where I like do a PR review, get back to work, do some coding, do some other stuff, and so on. So I kind of like to put that together. And yeah, then most of my actual work on Serenity is either in the evenings or like on a weekend or stuff like that.
Got it. It's interesting that you say that you sort of find it easier to try to do all your pull request reviews in a row, even if they're like in different projects.
Yeah, no, it works very well to switch between projects, but not as well to like switch between coding and looking at code.
Yeah, I guess I can relate to that. Okay, so let's see. Let's go through the questions. So Samuel was asking what streaming software we're using. This is called Streamyard, streamyard.com. And I've been a guest on Streamyard before, so it was the only thing I was brave enough to try today. So far, so good. And let's take some other question here from Dead Marshall, who was asking about the Serenity API, asking if it's like Unix. I guess that's kind of a, I mean, it's a broad question. It has a Unix-like API for sure. Like we provide system calls, but we don't really have a stable API in the first place. What we have is a slightly stable API, which is our C library. So there's absolutely no guarantee that if you compile something for Serenity today, that it will run tomorrow. Very often it happens that you compile something and it's just broken in a few hours. It depends on what's going on in the system. And at least so far, I think it has been a great benefit that we don't commit to any particular API, because it allows us to move much more flexibly and adapt to changes that we want to make and so on.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like just imagine what a hassle it would be to like put in deprecation warnings or like have versioning and guarantees that this API will be supported for so and so long.
Yeah, right, exactly. I was even thinking about that. It's kind of, we've been around for a while, but we still have pretty few upstreamed things in tools that we use. So we have like CMake support, for example, but we haven't really upstreamed all of it. We have compiler patches, but we don't upstream those. And I think a lot of that is just because it's so flexible to own them ourselves. And there's no real value to upstream owning them other than, well, if they change something, they're not going to break us as easily, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so far the flexibility of having an unstable API has been really nice for us. So let's just look here. Chihiro says that it's cool to see us both here today. I agree. It's pretty cool.
Glad to hear that.
Okay, here you go.
Linus, what would you say is the biggest disadvantage with the open source model? I mean, everyone has their own pros and cons for that. I'm a huge fan of open source. It's sort of one of the reasons why I really like developing so much. Like I used to do a lot of stuff in private when I first learned programming, basically. But like going out and doing it with others who like share similar interests or can teach you a whole lot, it's just great. Now for disadvantages, that's a good question. So it's a lot of work, or it can be a lot of work sometimes. And sometimes people don't really appreciate that work, I feel like. Like they just want to see the project move forward, and maybe they don't really see what's going on behind the scenes and like what people are actually working on. They just focus on like their little issue that hasn't been implemented for a year, and why is no one doing that work? Sort of that can get a little negative at times. I don't really mind that it's not paid. I know many people bring that up, like open source is not paid enough. People should get paid for it all the time. Like, I mean, I have a GitHub sponsor, so I'm glad for all the people who support me on there. But I also unconditionally want to do open source regardless. So I'm not one to hide like a part of my contributions behind a paywall. So I'm very happy to like do it for free, basically, because it's fun, right? Like that's the main reason I do it. It's fun.
Yeah. I can relate to that too. And it's weird. I've seen some people make these GitHub sponsors accounts where they say, oh, if you become like a top tier sponsor, then you will get access to my private repositories. And I guess it's good to try stuff, but that just feels so weird to me. That's like totally alien to the open source community that I grew up into, where, you know, it's like you say, it's about fun. And people who, like, we would do it even if there was no money, there was no
exactly,
no fame, no glory, just the fun of programming. But at the same time, you know, it's hard sometimes because you have to make room for the people who have different motivations than you do. Like there are people who are in this field for different reasons than just fun. Like maybe they thought this would be a high-paying field and they learned it and they're in it for the money, but they got really good at it. So you still have to respect their skills. And it's funny to try to coexist with that when you're so enthusiastic yourself. If that makes sense to you. I don't know if you've encountered people like that. I've worked with some people who were not really interested, just they like the money.
Not personally, but I definitely know what you mean.
Yeah. Okay, wait, hold on. I have to learn the interface here. So, question by Yakut: what is main motivation of designing it? So, I guess the main motivation, from my side at least, was that in order to future-proof our project, we want to have memory safety, so that we don't have to deal with memory safety issues, you know, in 10, 20 years from now, because that would just... There's something that's so boring about fixing avoidable problems, I guess. Like something I always enjoy in programming is coming up with a way so that I never have to have this problem again. And memory safety is one of those problems that you can solve and get rid of for yourself by using a different language. And I guess I wanted to move past the point in Serenity where we have to deal with memory safety issues. So that was my motivation for starting to investigate a different language. And then it was a bit like the story of Goldilocks, I guess, that I couldn't find a porridge that was just the right temperature. So we had to make our own porridge. And now it feels a little bit like we're in the bear's kitchen, but I think it's going okay. Let's see. So about pull requests, I'll let you take this one.
Is it a bad practice to not have any comments on a large PR, or is there sometimes genuinely nothing to be improved? I assume that means comments from a maintainer or reviewer, because they mentioned the improved part. I don't think it's bad practice. Like if the PR is genuinely really good and doesn't need anything improved, then it can just be merged with no additional comments. We definitely had that in Serenity before. Like I've merged PRs well over 1,000 lines with no complaints whatsoever. Usually from people who like have been in the project for a long time, like they know the coding style and what sort of patterns we use and stuff like that. And then you kind of just agree on everything. Like it looks good. It might not be perfect, but that's not really what we're going for, right? Like we can do incremental improvements, so don't see anything wrong with that.
Yeah, sometimes you have to take big steps.
Also that, yeah. Sometimes it's just unavoidable to have like a massive PR merged at once.
Yeah. I don't remember who said this. I read somewhere that if you don't regularly merge pull requests without comment, then you're not doing enough to teach people. basically.
That is true in a way, but I mean, that only applies if there's something to be taught, right? Like, if we're sort of on the same level and it's not like super crazy stuff where we can still improve ourselves, if it's like basic Serenity stuff, it's just a lot of it, then there might nothing to be teach. So
yeah, I think maybe teach is not the best word here, but like,
oh yeah,
if everybody already understands the practices, as you say, like the coding style, the requirements, and so on, and it looks like a great patch from the beginning, then there isn't really much to say. Just like you, I've also merged countless 1,000-line pull requests that were just fine. And sometimes it happens that you then find some bug in that PR a month later, but that's just, I feel like that's sort of a compromise that's worth making. Just to sort of have that pace to the project that you can always move forward, and you don't hold up every pull request on arguing about like finding every little issue.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see here. Evolva project was asking, what will be the biggest advantage of Yakut compared to C++ once it's considered to be ready? Well, I don't know. That's maybe a bit early to tell sort of which would be the bigger advantage compared to C++. But at least from a design perspective, the biggest advantage will be that you won't have memory safety issues. You will have other issues, but I guess that will be the main advantage. If it doesn't have that advantage, then we have failed at implementing the language. And if that happens, which it may, then we'll just throw it out and do something else. But I really feel like we have to make the experiment at least to try to do it, because if we don't try something like that, then who is going to try? Like, we're the single best positioned project to try something crazy like this.
And can you bring it up again?
Oh, absolutely.
For me personally, I think it's the fact that we basically own the language and we can make whatever crazy change we want to make, regardless of anyone else's opinion on that. So for example, in C++, there were some like basic attempts to make a proposal for operator ? Right? To basically like have the try macro as native syntax. And that would have taken years to get through the process, right? And
yeah, if you could even get it through.
If we could even get it through. And in something like Yakut, where we like own the code and are the major user of the language, we could make that change in like a week from start to finish.
Right.
And like have literally all the code that depends on it updated. It's just so much quicker to iterate. It's basically impossible to do with any other language that you don't develop yourself.
Yeah, and of course, there's always the option of forking another language. So we could have forked C++ and try to do stuff to it, but that never seemed very attractive to me personally. I don't know about you.
No, same.
Yeah. Let's see. Mr. Smoked Turkey was asking about the UI, if it's something from Streamyard. Yes, it is. I'm clicking on your little comment and it pops up really large. Fancy. Oh my goodness, I am so far behind in comments. Let's just click on something. Let's start with a short one. Hello, Nico.
Hello.
All right, here we go.
Linus, do you actually like C++? Now that's going to surprise you, but the answer is yes, I do. So here's the thing. I talked about this quite a bit in the CPP Cast podcast episode that I did a while ago. But I started learning C++ for a single reason, and that is contributing to SerenityOS. And so I don't have a history with it. Like, I don't know all the arguments that have gone on for years and people liking or disliking the standard library and like adding more and more features on top. Like, I knew nothing of that. I just like started learning it and then doing some coding with it and then learning more and so on. And I don't use a lot of C++. I only use the C++ that we use in Serenity, which is like a subset of the whole language and standards and whatever. And so that part I definitely like. Like, it's a nice way of building what we built. I mean, yeah, not much else to say about that.
So what you're saying is basically that you're an extremely sheltered C++ user.
In a way.
So you haven't used any third-party libraries for C++?
No, none
Okay.
at all. Like my only exposure is Serenity and CMake and a little bit of Make in the early days, but like anything else I don't know about. So I don't really have a motivation to look into what's terrible about it. And that kind of keeps me on that path that I say, I like it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think I don't see why you wouldn't like it when that is your perspective. I think people who work on C++ and Serenity have fairly small complaints about it. I mean, obviously there are issues, and enough issues to motivate trying to make a new language, but still, it took us really far even before that became consideration. So, but I like your answer. It's an unusual answer. Most people have, archives of anger going back a decade.
I'm well aware, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Tobias was asking, I know you guys don't use window managers, but how would a Serenity window manager look like? I don't know. Do you have feelings about that, Linus?
I'm not sure what the question is. What is a Serenity window manager? I mean, we have Windows Server, which basically is a window manager. So
yeah, so right now, Windows Server is a compositor and window manager smashed into one thing. So there's been discussion at some points about splitting those apart and having a sort of Windows Server be a compositor only. And then you would do decorations in a separate window manager thing that you could then extend in various ways, or even implement your own one, I guess. But that never seemed attractive to me, since we control the whole stack. Like, why would we want to fragment it at this arbitrary point? I think this is we often get these questions, people coming who they're used to, oh, here's a natural extension point in the Linux ecosystem. Like, people write window managers, or people make custom shells, or people customize a Linux system in some specific way, and they think, oh, how do I do the same customization in Serenity? But it's not really the same, I guess, system architecture. That we just control everything and create a single unified experience instead.
Yeah, and even if someone wants some options to have it like behave or look differently, that's then built into the thing we already have. So like, there's no need to split it up. It's still going to be unified, even if there are options to make it behave differently.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we have lots of features in the Windows Server today that I don't use, and probably features I already forgot are there. But I think that's ultimately not a bad thing. I would much rather have one good Windows Server that has a couple of features that are optional, instead of having 5 different window managers that have like huge amounts of overlap in functionality, but they do like some little detail differently from each other. That's just yeah. I guess that's one of the strengths of the whole system that we have, is that there is a single version of everything, and there's no overlap between libraries, for example. Like, if you look at Linux, a typical Linux system, you probably have, at least 2 or 3 XML parsers on your average machine, and I don't know how many JSON parsers, and there's like multiple of everything.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a relevant question from Nico.
Have you ever tried playing frisbee with your pop filters? No, Nico, I have not, but I will definitely do that after the stream. How about you, Andreas?
I can't say that I have. Thank you, Nico, for this excellent question. All right, here's a more serious one from Godly Butcher.
How did you first get involved with Serenity? That's for me, because we know the answer for you. It's a good question. So first involved, I got, I think, after watching the YouTube videos for a while, and then kind of thinking, oh, I should try to contribute something myself. There's a funny tweet about that where I say I don't know C++, so I can't contribute. So I changed that. And then I think it really started when you started doing the JavaScript engine. And like once that video came out, I was like, yes, now that's my time to shine, and I can join like building a JavaScript engine, because it seemed like really exciting and turned out to be really exciting. And so yeah, so that's, I think, early 2020, and then mid 2020 I really started with the JS engine.
Yeah, you became productive really fast. Because I know you told me in the beginning that you didn't know C++, but I forgot that immediately after I saw you just start hacking on stuff.
It was lucky timing, to be honest, because I had a lot of time, because it was just when the first lockdown started in the UK for coronavirus. So I basically spent all my time indoors and hacking on Serenity. So
I can relate to that. Sure.
yeah.
Okay, here's another one. Did we ever consider using the mold linker for faster linking? So as far as I know, that's actually already an option. Like we have a script for building with mold, right?
Yeah, and I think there's a CMake flag or something.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's actually faster, but I know that we support it. And we also have a port of mold, so you can run mold on Serenity as well.
Yeah.
And I've tested it, but since we don't really have great multi-core support, like I guess a lot of the appeal of mold is that it's heavily multi-threaded, and we don't really get any of the advantages from that unless you run an SMP, which is a little bit unstable. But yes, we are definitely considering it. Let's see. Okay, German WTB says, do you worry a little that Yakut will make the project less approachable? So I guess I'm going to let you answer that, Linus, because yeah, I want to hear what you say.
I know your answer to that, and I pretty much agree, which is no. Basically, the opposite would be the case, that Yakut would make it a little bit more approachable, just because some of the like difficult parts of C++ are just disappearing. And I mean, the goal is basically to just make the code as nice and straightforward to read and write as possible, right? We wouldn't like invent any sort of complicated syntax that has some gotchas or things like that. So the goal should basically be that anyone coming from another programming language could pick it up a bit more easily than if it was written in C++.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, people coming to us, they are experiencing Yakut for the first time because it's not used elsewhere. But I think there's such extreme similarities to other languages that, as you say, like as long as you have experience with some language, you will pretty quickly orient yourselves, I think.
And also in typical Serenity fashion, it's just taking all the good ideas from existing languages and putting them in a new language. So that's like what we do. So we'll definitely see like keywords and syntax from various languages that you may or may not be familiar with, and like general patterns.
Yeah. And I know that people have different opinions about this, but I think that the extremely readable style is to our advantage in this case, because the language is just so extremely readable. You don't have to wonder what something does. And I remember JT showed it to some of their like coworkers from the New Shell project, and they said it was very readable except this one thing, which we used to have a $sign as a shorthand for this dot. And they asked, what does that do? And because of that, we went and changed it so that it was something more obvious. And I think having that sort of iterative process where we constantly evaluate, like, is this actually readable? Can somebody new understand what this does? Or do they come in and ask, does everybody come and ask the same question? Like, okay, this is good, but what does this character mean? You know, if people are asking that over and over, then we have to change it.
Yeah.
That's sort of my perspective. Okay, Nico has more silly questions, but let's just skip over those for now. Sorry, Nico. Okay, John was asking, Andreas, have you ever thought about the far future when it comes to Serenity, apart from making Serenity closer and closer to a fully fledged operating system? Well, I think about the far, far future sometimes, but I don't really see a point where Serenity is ever like finished. I think building an operating system like this is an everlasting project. There isn't an end to it. And, there's always going to be new people coming in and out of the project with fresh ideas and inspirations. And we have a browser, so the web is like a moving target that its whole own thing that you have to keep updated. And there's always something fun to do. I really struggle to imagine a future where I would feel like, oh yeah, there isn't really anything to do now. What do you think about that, Linus? Like, do you think that you'll ever feel like there isn't anything more to do?
No, I mean, that's not specific to Serenity. That's many, many software projects that just have a scope that ever extends until eternity. I mean, it's the same with major other operating systems like Linux or kernels, I'm sorry. Like they have been going for so many years, and they still do like so much active development for like new hardware and new techniques to improve something, make something faster. It just never stops. And I mean, that's especially true for an operating system where the scope naturally is much broader than anything else would be. And then even if you, as you say, put a browser in it, that's like sort of an operating system in itself. Yeah, I also think it's just there's always going to be something, some work to do. We're not going to run out of work anytime soon.
Yeah, but I guess the question was also thinking about the far future in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very different for different people. Like some people just like working on it and don't really want to use it long term, and I guess that's fine. I would like to use it. Like if it can replace my Linux machine or Linux operating system, then I'm happy to do that. And yeah, I mean, everyone has basically their own opinion on this, and people come and go as they like. So the people who are in the project today might have a different opinion than the people who join the project in 5 years.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I remember the first time somebody told me that I don't use this, I just want to improve it.
Yeah.
I was so surprised, but I guess that's fine too.
Definitely.
Let's see what's going on here. Somebody says, the Yakut post feels engineered to not talk shit about other languages. But as an Ada aficionado, it would be cool if you considered it before settling on Yakut, and what do you make of it? So I've considered many different languages, and we evaluated a couple of them, but ultimately they were not right for the programs that we wanted to write. And if you think about the Serenity project, what we do is we make stuff from scratch. And the idea of like adopting another existing language and sort of having to suddenly work around all these new idiosyncratic things and adopt, patterns and memes from another language, the more I thought about that, the less it felt like the Serenity thing to do. We should, I guess, look for ways to make the system more our own than taking in some external influence like that. But we've looked at many languages, and you're absolutely right that I'm not going to shit on other languages, because other languages have strengths, they have weaknesses. And in our case, none of them were right for the code that we want to write. I guess I'll say that.
And for the record, it's going to be the same with Yakut. Like it's going to have strengths and weaknesses. It's not like we're creating the ultimate perfect programming language. It's just that we're optimizing the strengths for our specific use case.
Yeah, so exactly. Like Yakut is probably going to suck at in other environments. If you try to use it to build an in-car entertainment system or whatever, it will be terrible for that because it's not what it's for. We're specifically making something to make graphical desktop applications for a Unix-like operating system. And then if that works well, then we can also scale downwards and add low-level stuff so that we can build out our kernel in the same way. But we're sort of, right now it's still an experiment, right? We're just trying to see if we can make something that fits our use case better than anybody else. So let's see. Oh,
Linus, how did you encounter the Serenity project? Unfortunately, I don't remember. It was probably either on some Reddit post or some Twitter post that someone shared, or maybe a YouTube recommendation. But I don't remember how specifically I got my first impression of Serenity. Yeah, that's it.
cool. And here's Chihiro is asking or saying, today I taught my teammate to use git add-p when making commits. Double chin smiley face. Because I saw a lot of console.logs in their PR. Well. And you stole this command from my videos. So I didn't know about git add-p when I started. In my earlier videos, I was not using it. I was doing like this surgery on my code and then sort of undoing the surgery after staging the commits. And people saw me doing that and they were screaming at me in the YouTube comments, like, just use git add-p. Come on, what the heck? And I ignored them at first. I mean, I looked up what the command was and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I forgot about it. And people kept telling me to do it. And eventually I started doing it. And now I can't go back. I don't know. I can't even remember what life was like before git add-p. It was cumbersome, I think.
It's a useful command for sure. Personally, I often use the C-line IDE for committing, where you can like select individual not lines, but like groups of lines. And so sometimes I can avoid the command line. But yeah, there's definitely a number of very useful Git commands that everyone should learn. Like you don't need to learn the entirety of Git. You can get very far with a specific set of Git commands.
Yeah, but like just for having a structured workflow with Git where you make atomic commits, staging individual hunks is such a quality of life improvement for that workflow specifically. And it's always fun when people pick up like good Git hygiene habits from Serenity. Like even if they don't participate in Serenity, they still sort of get infected by our habits, which that makes me feel a little good. I'm happy about that.
It was the same for me. My Git commits are much nicer after Serenity than they used to be.
Yeah, you've become almost like a little bit militant about Git hygiene, I would say.
That's fair, yeah.
All right, so let's take this question about Yakut. How do you want to manage to keep a direction for the language and avoid it becoming just a collection of random ideas that don't go together well? So my thinking about that is that we are in a very good position with Yakut because we have one customer. It's the Serenity operating system. So if something makes working on Serenity better, then it's probably a good feature. And if it doesn't improve working on Serenity in some tangible, measurable, whatever way, it's probably not right for the language. And that gives us this crude, but I think really effective filter to just immediately tell, like, is this a useful feature for the language? And we don't have this thing that every other language has, where they have to evaluate features in the context of arbitrary projects that might use the language. I at least it's my intuition that filtering will allow the language to sort of reveal itself rather than becoming a mess of things. But of course, it's something that I am concerned about, although the more I think about it, the less concerned I get. But I would love to hear what you think about that, Linus.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think early on, we might end up like mixing a couple of weird ideas in. But later on, when we like write thousands of lines of code in Yakut, we will very quickly figure out what sort of works and what doesn't. And then we can still backtrack. Like, it's not too late at that stage. We can still backtrack, revisit some stuff, find some alternatives. So I think it's probably impossible to like make it perfect from day one, but we can get there eventually.
Yeah, and like everything with Serenity, like we were saying about ABI earlier, we don't have to commit to something.
Yeah.
Like we will incrementally figure out what the right thing to do is. And I think at least historically, we've been pretty good at recognizing when something is maybe not the right direction and then going in a different direction instead. And I don't see why this would be any different. If we go down a track that ends up making the code worse somehow, then we'll just have to admit that and switch gears. Of course, it's easy to say that, and we're going to have to see how it works out in practice, but I'm optimistic.
Yeah, me too.
All right, let's take a question from Michaela.
How are you all liking VS Code? Are there any plans for a JetBrain /CLine Yakut plugin? So first of all, there are no plans, as you know. Personally, I like VS Code. I've used it quite a lot before Yakut as well. So basically for years, I've been doing Python development and web development in VS Code. So I mostly use CLine for C++. And there is, in fact, an ongoing JetBrain /CLine plugin in the works. I think Matt and Network Exception are working on that. And I think they already got the syntax highlighting figured out and are starting to look into like completions and stuff like that. So definitely yes.
Yeah, and I guess like with every time you switch IDEs, there's always a bit of friction. I hadn't used VS Code much before, other than trying it for a couple of minutes and being offended at how sluggish it was. But as it turns out, it's very dependent on which extensions you use. Some language extensions are very sluggish. And now that I've been using it for the Rust extension, that's not sluggish at all. And the Yakut extension, when I land the next patch I have, it will not be sluggish either. So I think it's just fine. It's just a bunch of new things to learn, like slightly different key bindings for everything, little idiosyncratic differences between the two. But I don't know, seems fun to me. Anyway, so far so good, let's say. And then we got a question here. Oh, this sounds important. Andreas, what is the secret behind the perfect well, hello, friends? I don't know. To tell the truth, sometimes I stop recording my videos and restart the recording because the well, hello, friends doesn't come out quite right. Like if it just sounds totally off, I will re-record. But I don't know exactly what makes a good one. I think it's just one of those things where when you hear it, then you know it's a good one. But with like starting off a video, that's the only thing. Like I don't re-record like an entire video if something goes wrong, unless it's completely unusable. But I will re-record the intro like 10 times just to get it right. So you definitely accidentally pressed one of my secret buttons here because I take it seriously. Do you feel serious about your video intros, Linus?
I feel like they are maybe the hardest part. Like once you are past them, it's kind of easy to get into the flow and just do programming and explain stuff along.
Right?
But like if the intro is awkward, then it's not a good feeling. So you kind of maybe have to start over, yes.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's see. Let's take something here from Abdul. We got a lot of Yakut questions. I guess that's natural. Asking, why is Yakut written in Rust? Does Yakut inherit Rust's memory safety mechanism? Would it be a lot harder to write a memory-safe programming language than an unsafe one? So Yakut is written in, the compiler is written in Rust right now for practical reasons. So when I started the compiler, I was doing it with JT. and JT was a lot more comfortable with Rust than with C++. And I would have preferred to write it in C++, of course, but we had to go with whatever was most comfortable for the most people, and there were the two of us, and I guess I was more okay with writing Rust than JT was with writing C++, and that's why we ended up that way. But the Rust-based compiler for Yakut is, it's going to survive a bit longer, but we are working on a replacement in Yakut itself, so it's not something that's going to stick around forever. Eventually, it will just be a distant memory, and we will have a Bootstrap compiler. I guess a Bootstrap compiler in generated C++ that you will then use to bring up the full compiler. But to answer the second part of your question, it does not inherit Rust memory safety mechanisms. We have a different style of memory safety. It's more similar to Swift, which is based on automatic reference counting. And you can absolutely write a memory safe programming language in an unsafe one. It's just about what you allow the language to express. That's the issue, right? The thing that makes a language safe is, can you express unsafe things in the language? And if it doesn't let you, then it's going to be safe. So that's sort of the way that we're approaching Yakut is that we're not going to let you do anything unsafe. So it will be less flexible than C++ in that sense, but for a good reason, right? We take away the foot guns, and you have to live without them, I guess. That's sort of that. Let's see. And Sophia was saying that they would also be more comfortable with learning Yakut and C++. What would you say about that, Linus? Like, if you came to the project today and we were using Yakut instead of C++, would you still be like, all right, I'll learn this?
I mean, definitely, yeah, I would learn this. I think after a while, when you have learned like a couple of different programming language, it gets easier in general. So I'm not sure if I could give a useful point of view here, because it's not that learning C++ has been totally difficult. It's just something you got to do, and it's not particularly more difficult or less difficult than learning some other new language. It's just like the basics of programming stay the same across languages. It's just different syntax and some language specific stuff that you got to learn.
Yeah, exactly. I guess I often imagine that anybody who has been programming actively for like 2 years, they can pick up whatever we're doing. Maybe it'll take them some time depending on what kind of background they have and so on. But if you've been programming for 2 years, you should have enough of a base to learn any new language that you try to learn.
Definitely, yeah.
So let's see. Oh, let's take a more non-technical question here for you, Linus.
Cool. How do you go about breaking huge tasks into manageable pieces so that it becomes manageable and approachable to begin working on new large projects, considering the complexity and tech challenges? I'm not sure I have a good answer to this. It's just like after a while, you just sort of learn how to do it. I can't really describe how to do it. And I still don't do it perfectly all the time. Like I still sometimes end up with a task that I work on, and then I notice in the middle of it, oh, I could have broken this up into much smaller pieces and would have gotten through this a lot quicker. And then it's just what it is. Like you either have to backtrack and start over, or you just finish it. But yeah, I think for me, the top one thing here is to not be afraid of like partial implementations, and just like be happy with committing a to-do that will crash the code in some unimplemented branch. Like that's the perfect thing to do, because then you can just move forward very quickly without having to go like into every little detail and making sure that every edge case is handled. And so that's how we basically, for example, did the temporal implementation. Like you got to start somewhere, and everything is sort of in intertwined and connected to each other. So you kind of, at some point, you have to make a decision. This is not going to work right now. If we encounter this case, it's going to crash. But hey, at least we can implement this part of the code, and then we can get back to it later. And so I think that is really, really useful.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely how we built much of Serenity as well. Like there's so many little branches still around, where there's some to do, and we'll just panic the program there if you get there because it's missing an implementation. And you're so right that fear of partial implementation is that really stops a lot of people, I've noticed. Like you see somebody try to implement a spec, for example, and they just start at like page 1 of the spec and they just try to like write out all the data structures, and then they get to the next part. Okay, like how are they just going to interact? And they just burn out before they have anything.
Yeah.
Before they have anything that's remotely finished. And yeah, it's so much easier if you just allow yourself to go step by step, which it's not hard, I guess. It's harder to do it the other way.
Once you figure out that it's easier one way, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Oh, I'm so far behind again. Do you see any questions that we need to take here? Dun, dun, dun.
Nico is yelling censorship. Very sorry, Nico.
Oh, yeah. Thomas was saying, I thought C++ ran in JT's family. Yes, that's Jason Turner, which is the C++ cousin of JT. Not to be confused, 2 separate people, 2 slightly different interests. Let's see. Valtteri was saying, as a former Swift developer, I'm very excited about Yakut. Cool. Yeah. Then I'm sure you can notice a lot of similarities between the 2. Obviously, we're not. I'm not gonna try to pretend like we're not stealing a bunch of stuff from other languages. Obviously, we are. We're stealing all the nice stuff and trying to avoid putting in any of the stuff that makes using a language, I guess, annoying. It was really my impression that in order to get safety, you can either do like a lot of annoying stuff that you can make the programmer do a lot of annoying work for you, or you can just kind of make these smooth edges to things. And it's less annoying for the programmer. Maybe you have a little overhead here and there, but it seemed to me like the overhead is acceptable. Like increment a number here, decrement it there, whatever, in the grand scheme of things. Of course, we will still measure, and in situations where something like that becomes an issue, we will have tools for improving it. So it was you, Linus, right, who added the inline C++?
I did, yeah. Just for the fun of it, and because I thought it was a really interesting idea to try. It's, of course, really simple because it just transpiles to C++, so I can literally just take whatever you put there, trust it's valid C++, and put it into the transpiled output.
Yeah, I mean, it's a slightly insane feature, but it is fun. Yeah. And I guess longer term, it would be replaced by a more versatile, sort of unsafe dialect of Yakut, of course, that allows you to do whatever the inline C++ would allow you to do.
Yeah, it's a temporary thing to just be able to easily integrate with whatever the outside world has already existing. And so like we sort of have to find an interface between all the existing stuff and the new Yakut stuff, because we can't like ignore all the existing stuff and go and write everything new at once. So yeah, that's kind of where this is coming from.
Nico again asking, why do you keep skipping my perfectly on-topic question? Damn it, Nico. I wonder why.
No comment.
Right. Okay, here we go. Like Totally EMB says, is it intentional to reduce number of future contributors by creating custom language for the OS to keep it developer-oriented? So
I don't think that's the case, actually. At least it's not intentional at all. We don't think that's what's going to happen. It's always going to be a developer-oriented OS, but like just because we're making a different language doesn't mean that it's going to reduce the number of future contributors. Like it's just many people have learned C++, like I said, including myself, for Serenity. So why would someone not learn Yakut for Serenity? It's the same thing.
Yeah, and one thing that JT convinced me of the other day, and now I'm totally convinced, is that we have to bring up like a super nice developer experience. So that's why we're building stuff like VS Code extension and great IDE support, so that when you start writing Yakut, your IDE will have all of the features that you're used to from other languages, right? Like completions, type hints, go to definition, all that type of stuff should just work from day one when you pick up the language, and it'll just look a little different, but you'll get used to that in no time. And yeah, and I think for me personally, like if I try to imagine myself as an external person coming to the project, which it's difficult to imagine, of course, but I like to think that the thing that appeals to me about Serenity is that it's like this whole ecosystem that's just its own thing. And walking through this portal into this world, of course you find a custom language. Like, of course, everything is custom, like everything else. That's part of what makes it so much fun, is that it's all homemade. I don't know. To me, that just adds to the appeal, I guess.
It's very different from what you would usually find in some other open source projects.
Right. Like
the self-made aspects.
Self-made, minimal dependencies, like only build time dependencies, right? And maybe we'll even get away from that one day. So let's see. JCS with the question here saying, will the cover of the O'Reilly book for Yakut have a yak shaving a yak? Maybe.
If someone can draw that, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that does sound pretty cool, actually. if they would propose such a cover, I might have to write them a book just to get the cover done. Let's see. Glenford was asking plans for a Jack bytecode format. Linus, do you want to detail the plan?
There are no plans. No, there has been no talk about that just yet. Currently, the plan is just to transpile to C++ and feed that to a C++ compiler.
Absolutely right. Oops. Let's see. Thomas was saying Serenity is an artisanal operating system. That's exactly what it is. It's it's artisanal. I guess there's this handmade community that they have sort of, I would say, some similar goals and principles to what we have, just that maybe they are like a bit more focused on like making individual apps or games, and with the hyper focus on performance, but sort of this handmade ethos, or the artisanal handmade ethos, it appeals to me that you would have a software that's like handcrafted, that you make something just for love of making, and for making something for yourself and for your friends. That is pretty sweet. Do you do artisanal software outside of Serenity, Linus?
I don't do that much software outside Serenity anymore. Like many of the open source things I do are now in some way or another related to Serenity, be that like the JavaScript test runner or like some other small projects that I try to integrate into Serenity to see how that would work. But yeah, I like to focus my time here.
Yeah. The same thing happened to me. At some point, I realized that if I want to make something else, I can just expand the scope of Serenity to contain the thing. Because I remember I wanted to try to make a browser, just doodle around with like a browser separately from Serenity, like back in 2020. Or or if it was even in 2019, I guess. But it just seemed like, why not just put it into Serenity? We're going to need a browser anyway.
Exactly. And on that note, if the chat got any non-Yakt questions, like about the browser or anything like that, feel free to ask them.
Yes.
This is not a Yakt exclusive stream.
Indeed. Good point, Linus. Let's take a comment here from Tim. For you, Linus.
Hi, Tim. Hey, I'm late, but I just wanted to say, love seeing both you and Linus on the same screen. Programmers love bare walls. Maybe we do, yeah. I haven't gotten any decoration on my walls.
Indeed. So I guess let's talk about browser stuff. So I have been a little bit out of the loop recently, but what's going on with the browser most recently? Since you talked about it in the update video, maybe you can give me an update.
Yeah. There's been a lot of like small, I mean, it's always the case, like small improvement. It's not like every month we got like a major big new thing. I definitely know that Sam is still working on CSS, as he does. Shout out to Sam. Like every month he just finds something new in CSS to improve or a new spec to implement. So that's always great to see. I know there's been a lot of like small UI polish. So not on the browser engine itself, but like the browser itself, like around bookmarks and the new new vertical tabs. So things like that. It's just because like eventually you would want to make the browser more comfortable to use, obviously, because like having good support for websites is one thing, but a browser that can't do anything and totally like lets you down isn't great either. So you need like work on a little bit of both to make like the whole browsing experience better. And so I feel like that's currently happening a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know where we are when it comes to the web platform test stuff?
I mean, someone's been working on that. I haven't seen any recent progress, but especially with the Lagom port of libweb, I definitely feel like that's happening quite soon. Because now we don't have to rely on like running the browser inside the VM and then somehow pulling out the data and visualizing it or like running regression tests. We can just do that in CI on a Linux host, which is a bit more convenient.
Yeah. Now that we have it building for Linux, I mean, I know that it can only output a PNG at the moment, but it doesn't feel like a totally distant thing that somebody would just slap that thing in a window and make a basic Linux browser.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Like some SDL backend or whatever. That's going to work.
Yeah.
If someone's interested, at least. What else? So, right, yeah, the headless browser, it's currently very, very basic. And that you can't provide a custom size, for example. But that's just like missing options that haven't been implemented yet. So it would be super easy to like add an option to resize the window to a specific size or add like custom interactions, like mouse click at this position of the screen at this time. That would be easy to add and could definitely improve this by quite a bit.
Yeah. Let's see. All right, here's something.
I think there were talks about a Serenity developer participating in TC39. Did that go anywhere? Yes, there were indeed talks about that. Some people from TC39, which for those who are not familiar, is sort of the organization that standardizes JavaScript, or ECMAScript as they call it. And like they advance all the new proposals and do all the editing of the specification. And they've gotten in touch one day and asked like, hey, we like your project. Does anyone want to participate? And we were like, yes, we totally want. And then that kind of died down. So I've been in touch with them once more, but it hasn't moved any further than that. But I still hope it's happening.
I think it's happening. It's just that the person who was going to champion us, I think they were on vacation or something.
Yeah.
So there was just some little detail like that.
Yeah, I mean, they are just busy with real life stuff, so
Yeah.
Not blaming them in any way.
Yeah. And I believe we nominated you, right?
I think so, yeah. But
at least it seems like the right person to send, I would say. I'm not sure anybody cares more than you do about this whole thing. So definitely good idea. Let's see. Here's a message from DJ Wisdom for us.
Hi, Andreas and Linus. Just dropping by to say, well, hello, friends. Did I do that right?
Nice. 10 out of 10.
Hi, DJ Wisdom. Good to see you here.
Yeah, hello indeed. All right. I'll let you take this one as well, actually.
I've done some stuff in Yakut, and the experience is being awesome. Is there a separate repository for the browser so I can look for issues and get involved there? There is, technically, it's a separate repository, but it's not a repository just for the browser. So we really like the mono repository approach and have everything from the kernel and user space libraries and applications in a single place. You can find that on GitHub and the SerenityOS/Serenity repository. So yeah, that's where you want to look for the browser and libweb and libjs and everything else.
Yeah, it's just part of the greater Serenity project, basically.
Yeah.
All right. More stuff for you.
Oh, hi, Idan. In related browser news, the libjs ESHost PR was finally reviewed. Yay! That took like 3 months, 4 months, 6 months? I don't know. It's been sitting there for a while. And so Idan has been trying to get libjs support into ESHost, which is like a utility to run different JavaScript engines, basically. And yeah, that's exciting news.
So what does that mean in practical terms? Does that mean that we can be like listed on some website or something like that?
I think in practical terms, it would make just integration of the engine into some other projects easier. So for example, imagine someone is collecting test262 data for all the different engines. And so they wouldn't have like a specific script for every engine, but they just rely on ESHost. And for ESHost to run like each individual engine. And so that would make it easier. And just for outsiders who are like not super well informed about Serenity, but still want to try the engine, maybe they already know how ESHost works, and then they can just grab that and give it a try.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. Like if somebody hears, oh, here's a JavaScript engine, you just have to build this operating system first. Like that's sort of what it looks like from the outside.
Exactly, yeah.
So streamlining that process for people who are specifically interested in the JS engine, probably nice to do that. Let's see. I'm just picking out some browser-related things here so that we diversify the stream a little bit.
Is there an overview for web standards that the browser implemented? Can I use style? That's a really good question, and I've been actually trying to get that up and running. So can I use specifically is against including browsers and engines below a certain usage threshold, basically. So they don't want any niche browsers, even the well-known ones, like some text browsers, like Lynx and forgot what the other one is called. Like they just don't want that, which is fair enough, I guess. But I've been asking in the Mozilla one that MDN uses, which is called Browser Compat Data, I think, BCD. And they were sort of kind of excited about the project, but I haven't seen any recent progress about that. So the short answer is no, not yet, but I'd like to.
Yeah, I know that you've been doing like this random outreach sometimes. It's really nice. Like you got us added to, I think like Python can now launch the Serenity browser and stuff like that, right?
That's correct. Yeah, a while ago I did a patch to the C Python, which is the default Python implementation, So they have a web browser module. So you can say like import web browser and then web browser.open this web page. And they have like support for a ton of different browsers like Firefox and Chrome and some very old ones. And they were really happy to just like include another one. And so I used to add that as a patch to our own version of Python, but then I upstreamed it. So if you just grab like the official Python source code, build it, and run it on Serenity, you can make that open the web browser, which is really cool.
Amazing.
Just like to see the integration into like some projects.
So I'm a nerd is asking, is browser getting closer to YouTube? I don't know, Linus, is it?
Well, there's a lot of contributing factors to that. Video playback is still very much no. It's not getting closer. No one is actively working on integrating video or audio playback into the browser, which is obviously a needed feature for YouTube. But a lot of general stuff like, does this run this piece of JavaScript, or do we crash, or can it do the layout? Like that stuff definitely improves over time. And yeah. I know that Luke is every now and then checking the YouTube and like posting update screenshots. Like this is how it used to get before, and now it's getting this far, and we can like render some thumbnails or stuff like that. So it's definitely cool to see that progress.
Yeah, I feel like Luke always says, like he posts a screenshot and then he says, and then we need mutation observers, yeah. Which is a DOM feature that we haven't implemented. And it just makes me wonder, like, how much farther would we get on the web if we had mutation observers? Maybe we should just sit down and implement them at some point.
Oh, someone's sending us spam in the comments.
Oh, wow. Spam indeed. Let's just get rid of that. Yeah, so we're definitely not getting closer to YouTube like actively. It's more like a passive thing, I guess. But that's something that's really nice about browser development, is that you go work on any feature in the web engine or in the JavaScript engine, and you just accidentally improve hundreds of things.
Exactly, yeah.
And somebody said on Discord, I don't know, like a few days ago or something, that nowadays it feels like we're able to run the JavaScript that we get from most sites, and we're more having trouble in like missing DOM APIs or just layout.
That was me actually who said that.
Oh, you said that, okay.
I said that, and it's true, yes. So right. I feel like early on in the JavaScript engine, the first like thing you would encounter on a website that didn't work was like JavaScript, because some statement or some syntax not being implemented, and totally just dies, and everything just like stops. And now in many cases, I feel like even if it throws like an exception in some weird tracking script or whatever, that's fine, but it can still like generally run a lot of the JavaScript code that we give to it. And I mean, many web frameworks are now JavaScript based, so like pages using React, they will still render. Like that works fine these days. It's just very slow.
Yeah.
And so nowadays I feel like the slowness is much more of an issue than the actual support for the language. And also web APIs. So it's not JavaScript APIs anymore. Now it's like web DOM APIs or some obscure stuff or some common stuff like mutation observer.
Yeah. So what do you think is sort of the strategy for improving the performance of JavaScript in particular? Because I agree, like you try to load any complex website in Serenity, it loads, it takes forever, and then you get like a broken page or something, or like a broken looking page, but it's still loaded and we execute it, but it took forever.
Yeah.
What do you think we should do about that?
I guess the number one goal would be to get the bytecode interpreter to a point where it's just as good as the AST interpreter.
Mm-hmm.
Or even better, because it can do like things like generators more easily, which are much more difficult in the AST interpreter. And once we are at that point, we should investigate whether it's actually faster by default, just because we're using a bytecode approach. And if not, why that's the case and how we can make it faster. So I definitely wouldn't spend that much effort on getting the AST interpreter as fast as possible, but focus on getting the bytecode interpreter further.
Yeah. And when it comes to like the browser rendering websites, I kind of feel like there are not so many people who are willing to get their hands dirty with layout problems.
Yeah.
It seems like, I don't know, there's something about it that just makes people scared or not want to dig into it. Do you feel like that's something that we could improve somehow to get people interested in layout?
I can relate to that, actually. It seems a bit more daunting because you don't really know where to start. Like, all you have is like a broken looking website. And especially with like modern CSS, where you got many different techniques of making layout work, it might not be really obvious what's actually broken. And often like a little change in layout can have a huge effect on like the overall appearance on the site. So there might be some misleading things, like the spacing might not be off because spacing is broken, might be off because something else is broken, and that just affected it.
Yeah, totally.
So I don't know what's a good way to make that easier. I mean, definitely the usual recommendation is to just reduce your test case to an example as small as possible that still looks broken in the same way, and then you can go about fixing that.
Yeah,
I
definitely agree with that. Like, I think it's such a waste of time almost to try to debug like an entire website, because you can't meaningfully look at the output unless it's something super obvious is broken, like, oh, the image doesn't load, and you try to figure that out. But these subtle layout issues, like, oh, why is this thing 5 pixels to the right? It should be to the left, that type of stuff. Learning how to create reductions is so valuable. And it's the same thing in JavaScript, right? You want to create like the minimum possible test case that exhibits the bug.
Oh yeah, but I mean, in JavaScript, you still get like a little bit more feedback because you get like a backtrace, and then you know exactly at this line, at this position, something is wrong. And then you can kind of backtrace it from there. Maybe something that would help is if we could bait you into making more videos on that. So you can show people how to do it, basically. Because yes. I feel like for me, that's been very helpful in the past, where I can sort of just like learn the process and then adopt something similar myself.
Fair enough. I can definitely do that. I have to admit, like, I got a little bit tired of only working on layout after doing the ACID 3 test. I feel like I ended up feeling like, wow, I haven't done anything but CSS layout for months. But now I don't feel like that at all. So maybe it would be nice to get back a little bit.
Awesome.
So let's see. Let's take this question right here for you as well.
Have you thought about porting the browser to other operating systems? I mean, that's basically what's happened very recently. Yes, people have been talking about that for a long time, over a year. But no one who's actually worked on the browser wanted to make any effort into that direction, because it seemed like a bit of a distraction in a way. Like, you would rather spend your time making the browser work better in Serenity than making it work equally bad on a different operating system. So that kind of just didn't happen for a while. Now we have a port to Lagom, which means definitely Linux and probably macOS as well. Haven't tried it. So you can build the engine itself, and then libgui itself doesn't run on Lagom yet. There's also a port ongoing to make that work. So it could be that once that is merged as well, we could just take the browser as is or make some small modifications and it would run on Linux. That's possible. Or that, as you mentioned, someone goes and makes a Qt front end or a SDL or any other GUI library and puts like the engine inside that.
Yeah, that sounds really approachable, I would say. Like, if I wasn't so completely uninterested, I would probably look into it. So let's see. Let's take this one right here. about browser screenshots.
Serenity should definitely archive a timeline of screenshots for browser web pages over time. Discord is too temporary. That's a good shout, yeah. I would definitely appreciate in like 5 years' time to see the screenshots from all the broken websites we used to have.
Yeah, it's I guess it's hard to know exactly where to put that kind of thing, but every time I do those, like last year, sort of the retrospective of the last year in Serenity, I make these happy birthday blog posts, and then I always have to go and find all these old screenshots of stuff.
Yeah.
And it is indeed super fun to look at. Hey, look at how broken this was half a year ago. And how excited we were that it was even working at all. I agree. It would be fun to have that.
So how do you do that? Do you just keep like a bunch of screenshots locally, or do you go and find them after the fact?
It's a mix. So
Okay.
I don't delete screenshots that I have locally. So like I just keep everything I create during the year.
Yeah.
And then I also sort of look for screenshots that people posted on Discord and stuff like that. But not the third year, but the second year I did them, I didn't take as many screenshots that year. I don't know why. And I remember being so frustrated when I was trying to make this blog post because I didn't have screenshots to back it up. So I actually, for the second happy birthday post, I actually had to go and rebuild old versions so I could screenshot them. So I spent 2 days just building old versions, getting screenshots of the way things looked.
I mean, yeah, that's always a possibility. I know Andrew has been doing that recently for his blog post on the build system and how that's evolved over time. And so he's been checking out very old versions of Serenity and building them locally. So that's definitely possible.
Indeed. Okay, so JavaScript question for you.
What are your thoughts on types possibly coming to JavaScript? No strong feelings, honestly. I know that a lot of people want to like move JavaScript into a sort of TypeScript direction. I don't think it's really possible while preserving backwards compatibility. And I don't think the people who would do that are interested in actually doing that. Like TC39, I don't think they have like a strong desire to make it fully typed. I don't know what's going on with the proposal to add like types as comments, where the engine is totally free to ignore your type annotations, and you only put them there for like developer benefit. So I'm definitely not against it, but I don't have strong feelings to move towards it either. I think compiling from TypeScript down to JavaScript is a good approach for those who want more stricter typing. And it doesn't necessarily need to be baked into the language itself.
Yeah. Yeah, when I first saw that proposal about types and comments, I thought it was going to be much more aggressive. But as it turns out, it's just like a developer convenience thing, as you say.
Yeah.
It seems to me that the TypeScript workflow, like I've used TypeScript for exactly 1 day now, and it seems to me that the workflow is pretty reasonable. You compile your stricter language down to a less strict language, very much like Yakut compiles down to C++ right now.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's see what Andrew has to say. Whoa, what's up with the fancy question highlights? Production value is through the roof today. Indeed. Oh, that's a nice cup you got there, Linus.
I know, it's a Yak Overflow cup.
You don't say.
That's a coincidence, by the way. We did not plan this.
No, obviously not. All right, let's see. Oh, here's Green Coder with something for you again.
What does Linus do for his day job? Linus is a web developer doing front-end and back-end work in React, JavaScript, Django, HTML, CSS, all that.
That's straightforward. Is this your first job?
It's my second job. I used to do some slightly different stuff, much revolving around data visualization and monitoring and factories and stuff. It's been a job in research, but I didn't really enjoy that as much.
Okay, so you're pretty fresh in the job market.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in my current job for a little over 3 years now, and I quite like it.
Oh, wait, so you started there like almost like right before finding Serenity?
Early 2019, way before Serenity. Yeah.
Way before, okay, all right. Let's see. Chris asking, how close are we to Google Docs support? I have no idea. Do you know?
I don't know either. I don't know if anyone has tried. I have a feeling Luke might have tried.
Yeah, Luke tries everything. But in general, like if you want to know how close we are, it's really easy. You can just build a system and point the browser at the site you want to know about, and you'll find out very quickly that it doesn't work, I suspect. But yeah, it's strange with these sites because they are moving targets. You know, Google Docs, they deploy updates regularly. I think sometimes several times a week they change some little thing, and you just kind of have to roll with it. It can be really frustrating if you try to take a break from debugging something, like, oh, I'm trying to make Google Docs work, but I'm so frustrated, I'm just going to take a break for a few days, and then you come back and the scripts are different.
Yeah.
Like, that's so annoying. Like, oh, my problem is gone, but I don't know what it was.
Yeah, that's sort of where it's outside of our control a bit, unless we like make a local copy of all the script files and then inject them manually.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's take some easy ones.
Cool.
How old is Linus?
I'm in my early 20s.
Cool. Linus has a YouTube channel?
I do, yes.
Cool.
You can probably find it by just putting my name into the YouTube search.
Yes. Oh, I bet I can link to it somehow.
Or you do that, yes.
Oh, wait. What is the address? I should know it by heart. It's like youtube.com/Linus Groh.
Yeah.
Damn it, that's not how you spell that. All right, I'm pasting it.
Thank you.
Nice.
It's Serenity development videos, basically. So in a similar style as you might find them on Andreas's channel.
Indeed. And I urge you all to subscribe to Linus right away. Twice, if possible. Gotta get those numbers. All right, let's see here. Here's a serious question. How are there so many Linuses in computer stuffs? This Linus, Linus Tech Tips, Linus Toolbots. Can you confirm or deny that there is a Linus secret society?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Damn it. All right.
Not yet. I will find out though, eventually.
Oh yeah, maybe you need to a certain number of YouTube subscribers before they let you in.
Exactly,
so,
yeah.
Subscribe to Linus so we can find out if there is a secret society. Thank you. All right, here we go.
So Linus started doing C++ solely for Serenity. That is correct, yes. I had no other motivation at all. I very briefly used it for Arduinos a long time ago. So like on Arduinos, little microcomputers, that can be programmed in C++. But I didn't know what I was doing or that it was writing C++. Like they never mentioned that. They just show you how to write the code. So yeah, I actually learned C++ for Serenity, and I only learned the Serenity bits that we use. So I didn't learn the standard library, for example. I have no idea how to use that or what's in there.
There's a lot of stuff in there. I don't know half of the stuff either. So we got a message from Luke here saying, what I like about Google JavaScript is that it keeps saying that we failed sanity. Well, that is helpful.
That's a bit harsh.
It's a little bit harsh, yeah. But from their perspective, I suppose it is true. We are not an entirely sane browser. All right, Requity is asking, when will I be able to order pizza on Serenity's browser? Good question. There's a chance that it's possible right now.
That is true. If it's just like a simple post request submitting a form, it could very definitely be possible to
Yeah.
order pizza using the Serenity browser. Someone should try that.
Yes. Because, logging on many sites works. Like, you can log into Reddit or I've logged into a bunch of different things and it's worked. So you could imagine that a pizza could be orderable. That would be pretty cool. I may have to try that. I'm not going to try it right now because, but it's something we do have to try. Evolva Project's asking, has New Shell been ported to Serenity yet? I don't think so. New Shell is written in Rust, and we don't have a stable Rust cross-compiler. There is a Rust cross-compiler sitting around in a fork of Rust on my GitHub, which we did was a month ago now, or a little over a month ago that we were experimenting with that. But we never pushed it to the point where it's like a stable thing that's part of the system, the build system. You could probably get it to stable. It's just that there hasn't been any great motivation for that. I guess the big motivation would be building stuff like New Shell, like cross building random ports, which could be interesting, I guess. If somebody wants to work on that, I would encourage you to do that. And Ali says that he subbed to Linus and then subbed again. Why does the button say unsubscribe? All right, please sub to Linus 3 times, Ali.
That sounds like a YouTube bug, to be honest.
Yes, just keep clicking. probably a YouTube bug. Yeah, you're right. All right, let's see. John says, I hope SerenityOS will have free VPN software as default.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. I mean, we could totally build our own VPN software.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll probably have to do that at some point if we want a VPN, because why would we import something?
It's just a question of whether someone is interested in actually doing that. And then they can do that. Like right now, I haven't heard anyone screaming they want a VPN right now, so no one's building one.
Yeah, indeed.
It's definitely possible. I've heard about WireGuard not being that large, actually. Like it's just a couple of thousand lines of code, I believe. WireGuard being one popular VPN. So, yeah.
Yeah, but then we have to go all the way and build a VPN provider as well. Obviously.
I mean, you don't have to. You can just if you self-host it and just point it at another server's IP address. And then...
Yeah, I guess. it would be a good start. You're right. Let's see. I'm a Nerd says, has anyone written a virus for Serenity yet? I don't know about viruses, but there have been exploits. Like a number of people have written exploits to gain privileged access to the system, which is fun, and I will actually pay out a reward. I feel like people forgot about the bug bounty program. Nobody's trying to get the money anymore. Actually, nobody ever, even the people who wrote successful exploits, I offered them the money and they all just said no. They had too much fun and they don't want my money. So I just keep trying to give prizes away, but they don't want them. But I saw that on Discord last night. Luke was hot on the trails of something. He had a use after free in the JavaScript engine, right?
Yeah. But I'm sure there will be more CTFs, and then we'll get our share of exploits again.
Yeah, that would be nice. All right, so we got a question here. Will the operating system become more compact when ported to Yakut, as in not needing .h and CPPs everywhere? It's just like having a browser.yakut for the entire browser. I don't think we're going to have a single file for the entire browser. That would be a little bit hard to deal with, I think.
But in a way, yes, there's not going to be header and implementation files like in C++. Like you just define a function and then you write the function. It's all in the same place. So yeah, definitely expect about half the files, I guess.
Yes, and then it's basically the compiler has to be smart enough to minimize the amount of work that gets done. So we're not like, we haven't settled on an approach for this, but we want to make it so that if you change something in a class in a Yakut file that doesn't affect sort of the API, then we should be smart enough that we don't rebuild the entire system that happens to use that API if nothing about the API itself changed. And I feel like that's one of these things that we've noticed with C++ and Serenity, that rebuild times can be large sometimes. Sometimes you have to wait a while. As Cyber Jesus was noticing here, 5,207 targets. Yes, better go put on a cup of coffee.
It's grown a lot, actually. Like, I remember when it was still like 2,000 or 3,000, and then over time it just increases.
Oh yeah. I remember when it was still like 10 files. Those were the days. Oh man, I remember when it took like less than a second to build, and then I did something, I added something, and now it took more than a second to build a system. And I remember being annoyed, thinking like, how can I avoid this? I really like the fast rebuild.
There's more spam if you want to ban that.
Oh, I can't do that? Oh wait, you can't do that, right? Because of the thing. All right, there we go. Let's see. Thank you for pointing that out. I am far behind in the chat. It's a little bit hard to keep up. Let's see. Here's something for you, Linus.
Linus, did you do an apprenticeship to learn programming/IT, like an apprenticeship as a Fachinformatiker in der Fachrichtung Anwendungsentwicklung, for example? Shout out to the fellow Germans. No, I did not do that. We briefly talked about this earlier. I'm basically all self-taught. I had some very basic computer science lessons in school. They did not help for what I'm doing now at all. So yeah, no, I did not do that. I was planning to go to university to learn that, but I didn't end up doing that.
Fair enough. And would you say that in Germany, like it was getting in your way, the lack of a degree or lack of experience?
It would have been much more complicated to like get a proper job with no degree or no university degree. It's still like a very different mindset. So like actually moving abroad has helped me in an incredible way, in that they don't really care about that as much. Like I have colleagues who have like an unrelated degree, like they did study something, but not computer science, for example.
Yeah.
Or some people just don't have one at all. And they don't really focus on it as much as Germany would. So like that was a good step to avoid that.
For sure, yeah. That has been my impression of Germany. I'm sorry to stereotype, but it sounds like it's accurate.
It is, yeah.
That like I get emails from people all around the world, and they always end like with best regards name, and then when you get something from a German, it's like best regards name, titles, and then they like list all their academic accomplishments.
To be fair, it's not all of them, but yes, some are very proud of what they have achieved. And
yeah,
fair enough. But
fair enough, right? It just seems uniquely German somehow.
Yeah, definitely.
So it makes sense that you would find success just leaving Germany. Is that a common thing that happens, that people leave Germany because of this?
It's not entirely common, but yeah, it definitely happens.
Like, do you meet fellow Germans who are on the run?
Occasionally, yeah. Not all of them in computer science or like programming. Like some of them totally unrelated, but yeah, definitely happens.
Fair enough. Let's see. I'm a Nerd is asking, is Andreas Swedish? Yes. Name some for you.
Linus, where did you learn about operating systems? Any resources? I learned while I was doing this, basically. I didn't really know any operating system specific stuff before I started working on this project. I didn't actually work on any like kernel related stuff or like specific operating system related stuff early on. Like I was just working on the JavaScript engine, which is like a standalone program, basically. You don't really need to know about how the stuff underneath it works. But But it certainly got me more interested in that. And like, I learned by watching the videos of yours and like just doing some small changes here and there as well. And definitely from PR reviews. So like people who really know their stuff and then looking at their code, knowing it's a good implementation and then like learning from that. That helped. But no, I didn't do any courses or read any books that focus on that in depth. Learning by doing.
Yeah, learn by doing. Learn by participation is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that as well.
Is really underrated. I think like people often seem to believe that you have to study these things, but you can also just throw yourself in the water and hope that you can figure it out as you go. And oftentimes you can, I think, if you just find like a friendly enough community and you have some experience, with regular programming. I think also in our case, I feel like I've seen you work on random stuff in the system, not just JavaScript, right? And you sort of just jumped into kernel stuff, or you jumped into GUI stuff or whatever. And just having all of those things available within the same repository obviously makes it easier.
Yeah, especially because you can basically in your IDE just click to go to source, and then it will slowly take you down all the way into kernel land if you want. Whereas if I wanted to like inspect how on Linux something is built, I would have to go from project to project to project, find the different like source repositories. And it's just so much more complicated. Like I can't just click to go there, basically.
Right, yeah. And they might be in different languages and different styles and everything. It's really strange to me that that software is built that way. The way we're doing it seems so natural, but I don't know. Maybe I just have this bias because I'm so used to it. It's just the comforts are so strong in our project. Let's see here. Sophia with leaving Germany.
Leaving Germany to get a job sounds pretty reasonable. It's hard to even get an interview here without university degree, it seems. So I did get a couple of interviews while I was looking to maybe move abroad or not. So I wasn't exclusively focusing on getting a job in another country. So even with no degree, I got a couple of interviews, but I just decided not to. But yeah, it's much harder, definitely.
Let's see. MobAX20Hex says, is somebody working on something like NFS or SSHFS client? Not that I know of. We have Plan 9 FS support built into the kernel, but it might be bit rotted for all I know. I haven't tested that code in well over a year. That's the only networked FS we have. If you wanted to build something like NFS or SSHFS, you totally could. We don't really have any like file system and user space support architecture in place. So you would probably have to do a little bit of architectural work to support that. But I mean, anything could be done, right? If it can be done on another Unix, it can be done on Serenity as well.
I was briefly interested in that as well. So doing a file system in user space and like just looked at the basics, how it would work. I didn't get anywhere, but it would be very useful for, I use Nextcloud and they expose like a WebDev API that you can like, at least on my GNOME desktop environment, you can just add that via like a simple import dialog, and then it shows in the file manager on the side like a remote file system. So
that would be kick-ass.
Yeah.
Do you think file manager should have tabs? Just speaking of
I personally don't use them, no.
I've never used them either.
If I need to like do operations on multiple directories at once, I just open multiple instances of the window and put them like next to each other and drag files between them or something.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't use tabbed file management ever.
I don't really understand the appeal of like, so you want to move something from one tab to another, so you move it to this tiny little thing up there in the tab bar. It just seems easier to have separate windows. But anyway, total digression. There's definitely a lot of things we could do to our file manager, though, to make it better. I feel like it's one of those apps that you use it almost all the time when you're using Serenity, like you end up in file manager, but it doesn't change much. Maybe it's too perfect.
To be fair, it's one of the more polished apps across the system, I feel like. Or maybe not polished, but like advanced enough to be like pretty usable. It might not have every niche feature that you could imagine, but like for file management, it just works. So
yeah. Let's see. I'm a Nerd is asking, does Yakut have a language server for IntelliJ? So I think that's what you were talking about earlier, Linus, that Matt and Network Exception were doing something.
It's work in progress.
Yeah. That's a work in progress. There's a Yakut tooling channel on Discord for anybody who wants to participate in tooling development, or just to test out the latest and greatest, possibly totally broken stuff. It's asking, will there be more video game porting videos? I don't know. Are you going to port any video games, Linus?
I don't know either. I'm not really big into video games. So I might be the wrong person to ask this. No, I don't play, or like I used to try developing my own small video games when I first started programming. Like it was one of the first things I did, like basic jump and run games.
Sure.
But after I got past that, and it didn't really interest me. So
yeah, if you don't like playing games, I'm not sure anybody would want to play your games either.
Right.
And in my case, like I ported a bunch of old games that I liked as a kid, but then I kind of ran out of those. So unless there is like a source port or some like a source code release of some old game that I like, I don't really have anything that I imagine I would want to go and port. I guess the one thing I might be interested in is like there's this decompilation of Super Mario 64, which looks like fun, but I think that it needs GL shaders, which we don't have. So if we ever have GL shaders, but then, you know, the project is so active these days that I'm sure that before I even realized that we have enough shader support to do Super Mario 64, somebody on Discord has already ported it. So that's something that has changed a lot in Serenity. Like now, if you have some cute idea, you have to kind of get started on it quickly, because if it's a good idea, somebody else is going to have it too.
That happens, yeah, from time to time.
Yeah. Although it's like the overlap in effort hasn't been a huge issue, I guess. There's been like a couple of occasions where two people end up doing the same thing and then they discover it once they're in the PR queue.
Yeah.
But I think maybe the huge scope of the project just allows us to spread ourselves out there. Let's see. Requi says port OpenJDK and then Minecraft. Are you offering to do that? Because I think that would make a great project for you, Requity. If you start with OpenJDK and get that ported, and then you can totally run Minecraft on Serenity. Good luck.
Might be interesting to try like one of the very early versions of Minecraft, because I know people have been like archiving them. So like the early beta or even alpha versions where you couldn't do much, just like run around. But it might be a bit easier to get started with that.
Indeed. So Seb is saying, well, I'm Danish, and what I hear a lot about Germany is that they have poor internet infrastructure and is far behind in tech. Don't know if it's true. So if it's hard to get a job, sounds kind of sad. Is this true, Linus? Are they far behind in tech?
Everything about that is true, yes.
Really?
Yes.
Okay,
Germany
I'm surprised.
Has quite a few infrastructure problems relating to modern technology, internet, that sort of thing. Yeah. I don't want to go in detail, but it's true.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Let's see. Graham's asking, is there a terminal built into the file manager? It would be nice to execute commands on a directory without having to open a separate terminal window. There isn't currently a terminal built into the file manager, but we do have a terminal widget that you could conceivably embed into the file manager. It might make an interesting integration feature. Let's see. Is there a reason not to do this?
There's also a button to open the current directory from File Manager in a new terminal window.
That's true. Yeah, on the toolbar, there's a button, Open in Terminal. I think also if you right-click in a directory, you can say like Open Terminal here, and it just pops open a terminal in that directory. But I could imagine that you could open like a pane with a terminal, and you could get some interesting integrations that way. There's room for interesting integrations there, I think. But in general, it feels a bit, it really feels to me like we're not exploiting our vertical integration stack properly when it comes to terminal stuff. Like we control the whole system, and then we sort of funnel every interaction through this tiny little abstraction called the terminal. And you could definitely do more there, right? Like you could have a much richer experience, richer interaction with the system. It's just the initial design of the terminal, it just ended up being a basic Unix terminal, and it was convenient to implement that to spec, and then it's stuck around that way. But I feel like that's one area where we'll eventually want to experiment to actually, cash in on some of our vertical integration stuff. Do you use any fancy terminal or something like that, Linus, or are you also just a
I'm a default terminal guy. I just use the default terminal emulator on my system, and I do change my shell from bash to ZSH, but other than that, I keep it as they configure it for me.
Got it. Let's see here. Falk David says, does Serenity have an OpenGL port? How much graphics programming can you do on Serenity? So it's not so much of a port as it is a complete implementation of GL from scratch, I guess. So we have libgl, which implements the OpenGL API, or one version of the OpenGL API, not the latest. Just I don't know how far along they are now. It's like 1.2 or something. I don't know exactly the specifics, but it's a software rasterizer. So we have libgl, which offers the GL API, and then it sits on top of libsoft GPU, which is like a software rasterizer that rasterizes the triangles to a bitmap, and it's fully homemade. Like it doesn't use any external stuff. And it has performance issues, of course, as you would expect from any software rasterizer. I think there's been recently some effort in trying to hook it up so that it can sit on top of hardware accelerated GPU. And I don't really know the state of that. If you are interested in that, there's is it OpenGL channel on Discord? I forget if it's OpenGL or GL, but I'm sure you can find it. And you can definitely do basic GL stuff on Serenity. But as I was saying earlier, I think there's no shader support yet, for example. So more like old school GL stuff. But I've seen stuff like Half-Life running on libgl, for example. So it is capable, and Quake 3 runs on it as well.
And not just running, but like running in a playable state. So like
yes,
30 FPS upwards.
Yeah, it's a really impressive piece of engineering, and definitely like where it's going. And I guess it's a testament to modern CPUs, the fact that you can like virtualize GL and still get a decent frame rate on the CPU like that. Let's see. Desert Fish says, hello, Linus and Andreas.
Hello, Desert Fish.
Hello, Desert Fish. Let's see. Dun, dun, dun. I guess we can comment on this right here. OpenJDK port from Andrew says that without deep C++ build system knowledge, there lies madness. You mean the type of deep C++ build system knowledge that you have, Andrew? Am I to understand that you are working on an OpenJDK port?
That sounds like it, yes.
It sounds like it. Wow, Andrew, that's so cool. I guess I would say, like, if there's one person I would imagine could just throw together an open JDK port, it would probably be Andrew, because whenever there's some weird build system stuff going on, there's always Andrew's name on it.
That is true.
In a good way, I mean. Like, I feel like he's pulled us all up the mountain, the big Mount CMake. So thank you for that, Andrew, by the way. All right. German WTB says, also, I always want to read this as German, by the way. But no. Serenity does everything in-house. Serenity processor, when? Well, Linus, when does it come out?
There's no plan, unfortunately. So once someone decides to make one, that's when it happens.
That's exactly the answer I was expecting. Yeah, I don't think that we need to make a CPU right now, much in the same way that a year ago I was saying, I don't think we need to make a language right now. Or 3 years ago, I was saying, I don't think we need to make a browser right now. And then you can extrapolate from that as you will. But I honestly don't think we need to make a processor for anything in particular. I feel like we can get by with the things that exist. That said, it is very nice to see people porting the system to new architectures. Like we have the AR64 port, has been picking up solid pace in the last couple of weeks with Timon working on it, right?
Yeah.
And I know that you, at some point, you mentioned being interested, a little bit interested in that type of stuff.
I am, yeah. Still want to see Serenity running on like a Raspberry Pi or something.
Yeah, but you actually have a Pi, right?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, because I don't have these type of things. I should probably get one.
And I know people are interested in RISC-V, at least some of them. There's no movement towards that, but if someone wants to do that, it's probably going to happen eventually.
Yes, just like anything else in Serenity. All right, Pseudonatural says, hello, Andreas. Hello, Linus. Is SerenityOS supporting any GPUs as of now? I know about efforts made to implement an Intel generic driver through Linus's blog post, but not about other efforts. Are you aware of these efforts, Linus? I have to admit, I am not paying attention to those.
I don't know of any like actual GPU drivers. I know Liaf has been and still is working on Intel, like CPU onboard GPU support. But I don't know in what state that is either.
Yeah, I guess realistically, the first GPU that's going to come online in Serenity is going to be the virtualized VirGL thing. So some kind of like virtualization GPU thing. And then that should help us at least build all the right abstractions so that it would be easier then to onboard other GPUs in the future. I've seen demos like Sahan and other people working on VirGL, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know what the state of that is. But it would be nice to get higher frame rate in Quake and higher resolutions for sure. Let's see. Seb was asking, will Yakut be using LLVM directly in the future or just transpile to C++? I know the project is young. Who knows? There is no plan.
Indeed.
We really don't have a plan, if you can believe it. Requity asks, have I checked out Managarm? I have seen the Managarm operating system and did not find it particularly interesting for my own purposes, but I'm glad that people are building experimental operating systems and, trying alternative designs. It's just not something I'm interested in. I just want to build a traditional operating system for my traditional use case. And I know some people may find that boring, but I just love it. It's I don't have these fancy needs to color outside the lines, and I appreciate the people that do, but that's not me. What do you think, Linus? Like, do you want to explore more unorthodox uses of programming languages or new ways of doing things?
Not really. I also really like this project, so that's the reason why I'm still here.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I know many people just check it out and then discover it's not really what they want to like do, or like what's their ideal idea of an operating system is, and then maybe they start making their own or try another one. But yeah, I really like where we are heading with this.
Yeah, for sure. And just to be clear, that's not to say that I have any kind of issue with Managarm. It's just one out of hundreds of projects that I have seen in the last couple of years, and nothing against it. It's just not interesting to me. Let's see. Andrew says, I haven't written 10,000 lines of Verilog or VHDL, so I don't have an opinion on writing a new processor. I feel like people are misquoting me. It's 100,000 lines. If I had done a pesky 10,000 lines of Verilog, you don't have to listen to my opinion about it. Come on. Let's see. Jeroen says, Serenity needs merch for the black spot on my wall. Oh, yes. These are my chair skid marks from turning around too fast. As you can see, they line up perfectly with the back of the chair. Sometimes I get startled and I turn around too fast and I skid the wall. What can I say? Maybe I should put up some cool merch on there. Maybe get like a sticker or something.
A lady ball poster.
Yeah, exactly. A lady ball poster. I don't know. Just grabbing around for stickers. I have a buggy sticker right here. I could put that up, but that's not going to cover everything, though. It's just going to look pathetic. I need a poster of some type. Maybe a picture of a yak.
Oh.
We'll see. Let's see. Dun, 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 dun. There are so many silly comments. I'm trying to scan past them. Jeroen says, the black spot is actually a sign of your dedication to the project. Should be framed. Oh, I see. You're saying we should make merch out of it. Like I should take a picture of it and sell that as a poster. So you can have my black spot on your wall. I don't know about that. Okay, let's see. Ognian says, is there any way to use Linux drivers for Serenity to remove the hassle of rewriting them? I don't think that's feasible. That's not, we don't have a compatible API or ABI with the Linux kernel, so they just don't fit together. That's the short answer to that. The long answer is just the same thing again and more slowly. Let's see. Eris says, do you think Yakut will make less new stuff people do because they think it is better to wait and write it in Yakut?
That is a fair concern, actually.
Oh, you mean like, do you think that people will slow down development in C++ because they're just waiting for Yakut to come around?
Yeah.
That's a fair concern. I feel like you have a comment, Linus, so I'll just let you.
Yeah, I mean, just some thoughts. I sort of felt the same in a bit when we first started discovering other languages and investigating what would be a good fit. Like at that specific time, it didn't really feel right to spend any more time on writing C++, because it could be replaced any day now. But it's going to take a while, and so I think if you have a fun idea, definitely go and write it in C++ right now, even if Yakut is not ready for it. You can still come back to it and convert it to Yakut later, or maybe some things will just end up as not being rewritten right away and stay in C++ for a year or longer. I don't know. But definitely don't feel like you have to wait for Yakut to be ready to implement something new.
No, absolutely not. We should expect, if we end up porting the system to Yakut, that's going to take more than a year. And it will be an incremental process where we convert a little bit here, a little bit there, and definitely not something that you have to wait for before doing something fun. And oh shoot, now I'm noticing that we are out of time.
Oh yeah.
Wow, we made it all the way to the end, Linus.
Cool. That was fun.
It was fun, right?
Yeah.
Dude, thank you so much for coming on Office Hours and taking some of the heat off of me, just answering questions. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for the questions, all.
Indeed. Thank you, everybody, for asking all the questions. And I'm going to have to shill Linus's YouTube channel once again. I expect everybody to go and follow at least 3 times. I just have to get the URL once again right here. Definitely subscribe to Linus for more extremely nerdy videos. Last one he did was like extracting the cache sizes from the CPU and displaying them in our proc file system. So kernel stuff.
Right. The next one is not going to be kernel stuff. I already have that in the works.
Oh, really?
It's going to be userland again.
Ooh, is this a teaser? Well, I'm looking forward to that. Yes. So thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Linus. If this wasn't horrible, then maybe we'll do it again sometime.
That's great.
Yes. Awesome. Let's see if we can end the broadcast. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.